Right.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Dunley, and I'm with EcoAction Committee of the Green Party of the United States. And welcome to this webinar on Earth Day to Mayday. We'll be having three speakers. Jill Stein, former Green Party candidate for president and longtime environmental activist. Michael Johnson, who is the Democracy Campaign Manager with Third Act, and also Butch Ware, professor out in California, and also the Green Party nominee out there for governor and recent vice presidential candidate. Uh, Actually, many of us started the Earth Day to May Day after Jill's 2012 presidential election. And the idea was to really highlight that the various issues that we all work on, from the environment and climate, but also workers' rights, immigration rights, peace, anti-racism, democracy, they're all interconnected. And in order to win these issues, we have to really win them all at once. We need system change, not climate change. This year, there's a pretty big effort to have a general strike on May 1st, combining a lot of different issues, certainly labor rights, immigration rights, democracy rights. That's primarily what Michael Johnson will be talking about. We do monthly, webinars. On our previous month, we did Earth Day. I'm sorry, the Green New Deal, Eco-Socialist Green New Deal, was something which the Green Party at first began to push in 2010, an eco-socialist Green New Deal that combined a very rapid transition to zero emissions, 100% renewable energy within a 10-year time frame, what we initially proposed, combined with a strong economic bill of rights. So we had a just transition, the right to a living wage jobs, guaranteed income, affordable housing, single payer health care, and free college. And that would be paid for through things like slashing the military budget, taxing the rich, and through the carbon tax. And so after the 2013 election, we decided to really, sort of highlight these issues. And that's why we gathered people here today. So I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Jill Stein. Let me get Jill, add her to the spotlight. Jill's a Harvard-educated doctor, a pioneer and environmental health advocate, and an organizer for People, Planet, and Peace. In fact, she was the principal organizer for the Global Climate Conversion for People, Planet, and Peace Over Profit. She helped lead initiatives to fight environmental racism, injustice, and pollution, to promote healthy communities, and to revitalize democracy. And I always remember that as part of the position for social responsibility. As a scientist, she really helped publicize the relationship between exposure to low-level lead and impact on children's development. So we'll turn it over to Jill Stein.
Thank you. Are you hearing me okay? A little bit of an echo there, but give a thumbs up if the audio is working for you. Okay. All right, great. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much, Mark, for organizing. Thank you, Michael. And Butch, who I hope can make it. There's a lot going on in his campaign right now, which is definitely at the forefront of struggle as they try to throw him off the ballot and suppress the uprising that's in the works. And, basically we're here to talk about that today, this uprising for people, planet, and peace over profit. Earth Day to May Day, as Mark said, was kind of how we began an effort really to connect the dots between Earth Day and the struggle for environmental justice and climate justice, and May Day, the struggle for environmental rights, for migrant rights, for workers' rights, and so on, and to connect the dots with 10 days of action. And when we first began to organize around this. We called it the Global Climate Convergence for People, Planet, and Peace over Profit. But we had a big debate. Should we call it the Global Climate Convergence or the Global Climate Strike? Because we really understood that if we are ever to get to critical mass, we need to not only connect our movements across these silos used to divide us in a game of divide and conquer, but we also really need principled action and we need truly transformative solutions. And we're not here to just go on bended knee and ask nicely because our system is basically built to empower the powerful. And it's a system of oligarchy and billionaires and corporations who are calling the shots. And we're reaching the logical conclusion of that right now. So I'm really excited to hear what Michael, has to say about strikes. We have a strike going on here on Mayday as well here in Boston. And we'll talk about some of those actions. And each of us has 10 minutes. So I'm going to talk fast. I'm going to use a PowerPoint just to help me crunch a lot of stuff together. And I'll be moving through it fast. If it's of interest, you can have it. That's what it's for, to help us really have tools and information that empowers us to better make the case and to better connect with each other to achieve transformative change because time is up. It's time to really make change happen because we are rapidly accelerating over the cliff. We're not just going over the cliff, we're accelerating over the cliff. And let me just do a share here on my screen. Give me 1 second. All right. So that should get us to share. And let me just arrange this. All right. So hopefully you are now seeing my screen. And so I'm going to just run through these and, any questions or comments, really appreciated. And we'll have time for that once the three speakers have had their moments. So the title of this talk is basically From Earth Day to May Day as the Empire Unravels. There's a new emergency imperative for the Green New Deal. And I don't know about you, but I think so many of us are mindful right now of this explosion taking place via the war on Iran, which could also be considered the war for Greater Israel. This war right now, which puts us all at risk, is a product as well as an accelerator of multi-system failure. And that means of our energy system, our economic, geopolitical, military, nuclear, agricultural, democracy, governance, and ethics. And we can't fix it within the same failed system. We really need a system change. And that's what the Green New Deal is about. This here is just a flashback to 2014, which was the first time we really took this on the road, the notion of the global climate convergence, 10 days of action, Mother Earth Day to May Day. And this was in 2014. And these are just some of the, issues and constituencies that we were engaging on this, from, climate justice to sort of local community organizing, this colorful picture here in the center, the debt movement, which was, the movement to basically shut down student debt, the indigenous rights movement with the action at Standing Rock, the fight within the Black community, within the African American community on all issues of economic and racial justice. The housing crisis was full blown at that time in the wake of the 2008 Wall Street crash and the foreclosure crisis, where some 9 million people were thrown out and Wall Street got bailed out. The immigrant rights movement, which was really beginning to come into its own at that point with a massive strike in 2010. So there were all these movements which were really thriving. And of course, this was all happening in the wake of Tahrir Square, which was also 2010, and Occupy Wall Street, which was 2011. And there was an incredible sort of realization of how much power we have in the movements and the uprisings that are all going on. And wouldn't it be awesome for us to be able to connect our movements and all pull together? And these are just some of the many issues. There are too many really to count and to fight. So here they are consolidated into basically five struggles, really: crushing inequality, climate collapse, endless war, and rising fascism. And they are all under the umbrella of a broken democracy. And, to look at unifying themes here, it's sort of the growing power, the growing concentration of wealth, and then the power of that wealth in the form of oligarchy, that is, the billionaires and the political parties that they can buy, that are bought and paid for, and the corporations that control the money here. So we've had sort of steady concentration of power and wealth that basically it's hard to fix anything when the whole system is so corrupt. So the context now, as I mentioned, the context of the Green New Deal and Earth Day to Mayday, when it originated, was this, sort of a newly recognized climate crisis. Although, many of us have been aware of it for quite some time, but the intensity and severity of that crisis was really dawning on a lot of people around that time. And then you also had the economic crisis in the wake of the Wall Street meltdown. So that was the crisis then. The crisis now is, sort of the precipitating factors now are a little bit different, and I'll come to that. But an overarching theme here is that the empire is unraveling. And the US has been in a rather blatant state of decline for decades. National and personal wealth, huge economic and racial disparities, the financialized economy, the offshoring of manufacturing, the drop in labor membership, which has been cut by about half over the past several decades, growing poverty, health, and homelessness, ballooning militarism, which we're going to come back to, endless wars, and legalized corruption in the form of a bought and sold political system. And I want to focus in particular on the war in Iran, because what's happening there is really accelerating. It's a symptom of US decline, but it's also really accelerating US and Israeli decline on many dimensions. And it's also triggering a rather cataclysmic shift in global power. And this affects all of us. But I just want to point to some of what's obvious here, that in response to the surprise US attack and assassinations, Iran seized the Strait of Hormuz. So Iran now commands 20% of global oil and LNG, and another 5% if the Houthis kick in the Red Sea, with a minimal military budget, $10 billion in 2023. Iran's strategic use of missiles and drones, which have been stockpiled for years, fired from hidden launch pads buried beneath impenetrable rock, that has enabled a standoff, a successful standoff, against the sophisticated weaponry of the world's allegedly most powerful military. Iran is using $20,000 drones and very cheap decoys to exhaust the $2 million interceptors belonging to the US and Israel. And they can, using those very low budget tools, they can basically keep the whole US Navy at bay. Iran is emerging as a new world power. The US and Israel are isolated on the global stage in their unprovoked, illegal, flagrant war crimes and full-on fascist violence. And just to, the point here is that, this has huge impacts on our economy, also on the climate, on peace and security for us all. And I want to just point to the fact that Iran has 10 demands, which are mainly about restoring its sovereignty and achieving repayment, really, for the damage done, both through in other words, reparations for this damage, both the acute damage of this unprovoked illegal war right now, but also the damage of nearly 50 years worth of economic sanctions that have been absolutely devastating. So Iran is trying to recoup its just compensation, and on that basis,
Jill,
grab.
let me just jump in for a second.
Thank you.
Your 10 minutes are up, but given that Bruce is not here, we're going to give you an extra 4 minutes.
Okay. Great. All right. Terrific. So I will try to move through this part quickly. But Iran has basically grabbed control over the canal, rather the Straits of Hormuz, in order to ensure that it will achieve reparations. And I've highlighted here the right to enrich uranium for peaceful purposes, which is allowed in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Iran is a signatory to. Of course, Israel is not. And I don't think the United States is either. But the point is, this is where the tension is. It's around the question of nuclear weapons. And I've just pointed to that here in the 15 US demands, which are that Iran would not be allowed to enrich uranium. The disagreement is not about whether or not Iran would have nuclear weapons, because it's been willing to say no to nuclear weapons. It's more about this question of enrichment. It's potentially a negotiable problem, but the parties do not appear to be willing or able to do that, especially on the part of the U.S., because the U.S. demands are essentially about maintaining full spectrum dominance, about maintaining U.S. military domination. And where the New Deal, the Green New Deal comes in here, is that it solves every one of these emergency conditions that are necessitating a Green New Deal, that make it an emergency imperative right now. And, the Green New Deal would provide the jobs programs to get us through this economic crisis, which is brewing. It looks now pretty inevitable that there will be a global recession, but it could be much worse than that. It could be a global depression that even goes beyond the 1930s. There's environmental crisis here. There are exploding wars, many of them, and the continuing genocide, which is expanding, rising fascism in the US in particular, and all the things that go with that, including ICE, which is an arm. It's sort of like the brown shirts of Donald Trump, who are not only inflicting violence on our communities, but who are also threatening via the White House to basically hijack our elections and to prevent people from voting, and in fact be there to arrest people when they come to vote. And to wipe people off the voter rolls. We are facing an outright nuclear crisis right now. It's widely understood that either the US or Israel may very well use Hiroshima-sized nuclear weapons. That's what's described by the term tactical nukes. Tactical nukes may actually be even much bigger than Hiroshima-sized nuclear weapons. And this is actually a discussion. It's mostly kind of off the mainstream right now, but this is a very real issue. All of this is kind of contained and addressed within the Green New Deal. This slide addresses what the economic impact is of a continuing blockade. And you may know that now there's a US blockade of the blockade, which doesn't appear to be doing us any good. 20% of global oil, 30% of global fertilizer, which is a guarantee for famine. And this is another reason why we need the Green New Deal. We need food systems that are resilient, that are local. We need to be using our waste, our food waste, especially properly, so that we're generating food fertilizer and we don't have to ship it from West Asia. Sulfur. 50% of traded sulfur is coming out of there, which is essential for solar panels and EV batteries and fiber optic cables, aluminum, helium, and so on. There's the makings of an incredible, devastating economic crisis right now. Basically, we go into gridlock, and one of the first manifestations of that obviously is the fuel shortage and the growing costs at the pump, home heating, cooling, etc. But food is right around the corner because if that fertilizer isn't there, it's planting season right now. So we have the makings of a massive famine right now if we don't find a way around this. And it's a very important take-home lesson here. I just kept thinking the more I heard about this disaster that's unfolding, the more it just drove home for me that, oh my God, this is why we were talking about the Green New Deal, because we're working in an energy and an economic system right now and an agricultural system that are basically disasters waiting to happen. And the Green New Deal allows us to basically move beyond that very precarious system quickly. I'm just going to close out here with a what is it? What is the Green New Deal? A rapid transition with public planning and ownership in order to achieve 100% and that is public ownership, specifically of energy, transportation, social housing, and banking. In order to reach 100% employment, it provides a economic bill of rights that includes a right to a living wage. So we're talking, at one point it was 25 million. I'm not sure what the number is right now. Living wage jobs to achieve 100% clean renewable energy, to jumpstart the green economy, combat climate change, establish food security, and particularly to make wars for oil obsolete. Here's the Economic Bill of Rights. We won't take the time to go through it. Financial reforms in the Green New Deal, democracy reforms, which include, by the way, putting an end to Citizens United, maybe through something like the Montana Initiative, which we won't have time to discuss right now, but very exciting stuff is in the works, or a constitutional amendment. The power is there. The cost is affordable. If we can come up with $200 billion in the blink of an eye in order to fight this illegal and criminal war, we can come up with the money that we need for a sustainable and just lives. The final
Jill,
thought.
we need to wrap up.
Okay, last thought here really is that this is Earth Day to May Day is a time to get out there in a way that brings us together and in a way that really isn't just asking on bended knee. So the strike or various forms of strikes, I think, are really where it's at. And there are many options. We're going to hear about them later in this discussion. And I'll just end with the thoughts of Alice Walker that the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. From Frederick Douglass, that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. We need to be that demand. And the bottom line from Malcolm X, we're not outnumbered, we're out organized. Let's get organized. That's why lots of us are working with the Green Party. All right, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jill. But speaking about May Day and the call for a national strike, Mike Johnson is the Third Act Democracy campaign manager. He has a background in municipal politics and public policy and has worked with grassroots groups, organized labor, and independent political movements to build power from city hall to state legislature and win elections. Thank you, Michael. Take it away.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Dr. Stein. Actually, I didn't get a chance to mention it when I got on the call, but I worked on the campaign in 2012 with my mentor and great colleague, Ben Mansky, out of the Madison office. So great to be back with Greens talking about politics. But hi, my name is Mike Johnson. I'm with Third Act. Third Act is an environment and climate and democracy group founded by the environmentalist Bill McKibben to combine the ethos and energy of the 60s movement, the Earth Day movement, and combine all those things with what we're seeing in this, from groups like Sunrise and other youth-led movements that have come up in the last few years. Our strategy is to mobilize Americans over 60. I'm not an American over 60 before you ask, but I work with Americans over 60 to work on democracy and climate issues. And Third Act is one of the partners of the Mayday Strong Coalition. So I wanted to talk a little bit here, talk to you about the Mayday Strong Coalition more generally, but also about the Power Up the movement to end fossil fuels, which is the climate contingent for Mayday. So
Michael, if I could just jump in for a second. Sorry to interrupt. But
Yes.
we're going to have questions and answers after you finish speaking. So if people have questions, you can post it in the chat. Sorry to disturb you.
No, you're okay. I appreciate it. So Mayday itself, the Mayday Coalition, Mayday Strong has been a call to action. There are really three top lines for Mayday, May 1st. that we tax the rich so that our families, not their fortunes, come first. No ICE, no war, no private army serving authoritarian power, expand democracy, and hands off our vote. So those are the three top lines from the Mayday Coalition, which bring together grassroots groups, environmental groups, organized labor. I've been on these. There was a mass call last week. There are partner calls. I can share all those links after I'm done talking about how to get involved with Mayday more generally. There's a huge toolkit about how to host events, how to sign the pledge. Folks, you can sign the pledge yourselves and it helps you get more information about what's going on for Mayday Strong. There's also a toolkit for how to engage businesses. Obviously, we're calling for no shopping, no work, but often small businesses do not necessarily have that available to them. So we've helped develop a toolkit to have people talk to small businesses in their community and tell them, how can you find alternatives that allow your workers to go, take the day off? What is your strategy for protecting your workers from ICE and immigration and federal agents? What are different things you can do that may go parallel to closing your business for the work day or letting your employees the day off to be involved with actions? Or if you can host actions, if you're going to stay open, maybe you can host actions at your small business. So that's sort of what's going on with like I said, with the Mayday Strong Coalition. Like I said, I can share more links about all those things. There's a way to sign a pledge to get involved. There are different ways to get involved. But I want to talk a little bit about the power of contingent, the movement to end fossil fuels. I'm going to switch to my screen here if I can. Can folks see that? So, for those not familiar
Yes,
with,
we can see it.
okay, sweet. So for folks not familiar with Power Up Movement to End Fossil Fuels, so Power Up is a coalition of different environmental and climate groups, Fossil Free Media, Climate Defenders, Stop the Money Pipeline. If you're familiar with the Summer of Heat from 2024, which was organizing to get banks to divest from fossil fuels, there were a lot of national actions. There were major anchor action at Citibank in Manhattan, New York, which a lot of climate groups were involved in. So Power Up the Movement to End Fossil Fuels. This is kind of I can send you our toolkit specifically for groups that are trying to focus on the fossil fuel component of Mayday, making, as Dr. Stein mentioned, the connection between big oil and Trump, the connection between authoritarianism and fascism and big oil. We know a lot of the same corporations, we know a lot of the same power structures are involved in this. The same folks wanted to invade Venezuela, invade Iran, invade Cuba are the same people bankrolling this administration, demolishing the EPA, gutting our different acts around environmental protection. So that's one of our main things, to make that connection and also build towards, there is about a lot of talk about a general strike. I'm not sure those are the components for that are there for Mayday for May 1st of this year. It's used a little bit more nebulously than it is, but I think what people are really thinking about is, how do we build the capacity to do that in 2028? Like I mentioned, I'm originally from Wisconsin. I was in Madison during Act 10, and lots of people were asking questions about, why don't we just call a general strike to fight back against this assault on organized labor? The truth was, there had not been enough pre-work, mobilization, planning, preparation to do that type of action. So of course, things were directed into electoral politics, and unfortunately, that didn't unseat Scott Walker in that particular case. So the strategy now is, how do we build towards a proper nationwide general strike? And it's interesting, because we do these trainings at Third Ec around anti-authoritarianism, and someone said, the labor movement's not large enough to do a national general strike in 2028. My response was, there are more grad students organized in organized labor than there are ICE agents in the United States. So if you think ICE can take over the elections and take over the country, but you don't think the millions of people in organized labor and their allies across this country can't shut this country down in response to the administration, I mean, I always tell people, don't will yourself into defeat. We're trying to will ourselves into victory. So that's what I always try to tell people in situations like this. So go through the So power up the movement to end fossil fuels. So our North Star is to build a people power movement. We need to take on oil and gas billionaires, and to transition all fossil fuels as quickly and as capably as possible. We have to bring more people into the movement, and that's why we started our fossil fuel contingents have started to get more involved in mobilizations like No Kings. Our strategies to base builds is bring more people in, train them on how to get organized, how to get involved with mobilizations and activations that are taking place, no matter if they're days of actions or sit-ins or teach-ins or strikes or different performance art and things like that. And when we do win and build strength, we want to hold folks accountable. I mean, that's where the Green Party exists, to hold people in power accountable, and also to question the power structure in its totality. It's in some ways it goes even beyond holding people accountable, but finding ways to win on campaigns. And so kind of our projected strategy here is we're building towards 2028 and beyond, is to do more trainings within the climate movement, get more people involved. I'll share a way for you to sign up to be a part of one of the fossil fuel contingents or Mayday and any future activations, so that you can get all the tools and signs and resources you get from climate defenders and Stop the Money Pipeline to help focus in on fossil fuels as we move more through 2026. So you can see this sort of trajectory and what we're aiming for as we start to build our work this year. And you can see some of the signs and some of the contingents from different 350, 350 and Mayday, No Kings 3 rallies. These are different pictures from folks across the country who organize in fossil fuel contingents at No Kings. And so our Mayday strategy is to be a part of the broader Mayday's struggle, but also to have that climate message in it. That was something that was really important to us, and something we tried to quickly assemble for No Kings, but trying to assemble even more broadly for Maydays, to make that connection between big oil and fascism. I mean, you're seeing it sort of in the top level sense, where people are like, the cost of living is going up because of these big oil billionaires that are jacking up utilities, refusing to invest in renewables, to destroy renewables. Trump is pulling different things away because of the people who are bankrolling his authoritarian regime, and making sure that connection is part of the message we're talking about. It's not just climate over here and democracy over here. It's authoritarianism over here and fossil fuels over there. It's all one big issue that we have to focus in on. So if we can knock down, admittedly for us, if we can knock down the big oil pillar, we think we can deal a death blow to authoritarianism more broadly. Because as Dr. Stein mentioned, the war in Iran is so directly connected to the authoritarianism of our political system and the fossil fuel industry. It all goes hand in hand. We asked for folks to think about how to organize in fossil fuels contingent. Think about the folks you would already be organizing with around Mayday. Show up to Mayday, and we can, like I said, we can provide toolkits and different messaging for how to engage people on the issue of big oil being hand in hand with authoritarianism and fascism. We can, like I said, we can mail you signs. We can help with support efforts to put you in touch with other environmental groups and just the broader kind of mobilization movement altogether. We have different visual assets, different posters and images, and we can, like I said, we can mail you signs that you can bring to whatever rally it is, and we can do one-on-one connection with the different folks in the coalition for fossil fuels. Like I said, I'll drop the link to sign up to organize the contingent, and these are some of our top-level thoughts. Bailing it or beating the system, just transition ahead, big oil funds, fascism. And I also have a toolkit for how to integrate the American perspective about fossil fuel fascism into the international perspective, because obviously Mayday is an international day of action, a call to action. So making sure we integrate how we think about things from our American perspective to a global perspective, because obviously the United States has a particular role in fossil fuel fascism in the global question. So it's down to questions for folks. I'll stop sharing right now. I guess I'll pass it back over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Michael. Let me get Jill up as well. One thing I'll just say about a general strike, I think people do have questions about is there sufficient critical mass to do it? In fact, I know a couple of years ago when Jill was pushing that was one of my questions. But I think two of the things that have come out in this particular situation was there was sort of a general strike called in Minneapolis in response to the two killings of the the people there, and people thought that was quite successful. So I think one, they're trying to expand that into a more nationwide effort. And then the second was, what surprised me was actually the United Auto Workers for a number of years have been planning to call a general strike for Mayday. And I don't know if this was the year it was a 5-year campaign to get to it. But I think the UAW, because of what got on in Minneapolis, and just, of course, the threat being posed by the Trump administration, has sort of elevated their push to do a general strike around May Day. So I think a lot of groups are still on the sideline. They certainly want to support May Day, not ready always to embrace the call for a general strike, but they are ready to embrace a large mobilization against authoritarianism and to support immigrant rights and around fossil fuels. And so we're going to open up the questions now. People have questions, they should put it in the chat. I have seen a couple of questions, and I believe Jill may have done this a couple of years ago, but people are asking, should we be doing a gas boycott, particularly the situation with Iran?
If you ask my personal opinion, absolutely. I think, the more we can do without, the better. And, the more we can transition to a sustainable energy system. And that means without fossil fuels, that means utilizing conservation and efficiency and rethinking our world, and what is it that brings quality and meaning to our lives? And do we need to be consuming as much energy and things as we're consuming, and, clearly the world is not going to tolerate the obscene inequities that it has right now, both energy inequity and the inequity of income and healthcare and all that, but energy equity is part of that. And in order to get to energy equity and still have a planet that we can live on, we have to come to some kind of sustainable living. If you think back to the bus boycott of Montgomery, Alabama, was it? In 60s, early 60s, I believe. Maybe somebody can put into the chat if you remember the details. But in the bus boycott in Montgomery, people went through incredible hardships, basically to walk, and to find other ways to get to work, because it's not like they had cars. They were depending on buses, and then they were going to even boycott the buses because they were segregated. And they found a way to do it. So much, I think, of what people are willing to do depends on how much misery and agony we are in under the current circumstances. And they are about to go from not so good for most people. Working people are struggling. Our 2/3 of working people are living paycheck to paycheck. People are struggling to keep a roof over their heads now. We are in a time of struggle. It hasn't gotten totally over the roof as it did in Minneapolis with ICE on the streets, beating people up and kidnapping people. And I think it's so clear right now that we are on the precipice of a major economic catastrophe. There's a chance we may be able to avoid it, but it's pretty small. And it's likely that things are going to go from bad to worse. So it's really important, I think, to be thinking ahead, to be able to envision where we're going to be a year from now. And there's a high likelihood that we are going to be in much worse shape, and that people are going to be thronging out into the street. And the more we can kind of anticipate where public opinion is going to be surging and are doing the organizing and the outreach and the coalition building in advance of that, we could really begin to see some tools move. And for us to have bike alternatives, and muscle-powered alternatives and public transportation alternatives and carpooling and things like that, so that, in effect, we are going into a fossil fuel boycott right now out of necessity, because the cost of fossil fuels is skyrocketing. Right now, it's, maybe up 40 or 50%, something like that. But it can go up 200 or 300% feasibly, potentially within the next 2 months, depending on what happens now in the Strait of Hormuz. But we have the makings of an utter economic catastrophe related to fossil fuels. So it's really time to start thinking bigger about how we fight back.
And Mike, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
No, I think Dr. Stein sums it up pretty well.
Okay. Now, this seems to be a softball question, but does a push to end fossil fuels have an alternative to fossil fuels?
Yeah, I mean, I can. Like I said, Third X co-founder Bill McKibben, he wrote a book recently called "Here Comes the Sun" about the reality that solar energy is so abundant at this point. And obviously, there are some components of that. I actually really appreciate you, Dr. Stein, mentioning that there are some industrial components that do go into making solar panels that we do have to be mindful of as we think of adjust.
And Michael is frozen for a second.
I'm seeing him okay. Mike, it might be your Wi-Fi there. I'm seeing you well, Michael. You're coming through.
So the most abundant energy we have in the world is solar energy. In states as distinct as California and Texas, much of the power there is stored power in batteries that are holding solar energy collected through the day. That's powering the whole state. California powers a lot of itself at night through solar energy that's been stored in batteries. So we know we don't have to use fossil fuels. One of the most destructive things that the administration did was roll back the renewable energy components of the Inflation Reduction Act, and so many states are having to take up that work. That's when you think about how energy is now being redirected into artificial intelligence and data centers, and not just power, but water and our natural resources. It's such a clear fork in the road, and that's why data center opposition is so bipartisan, so bi-regional. People are just like, this is my power, this is my land, this is my water. And I think it's like it really touches on something very, I think, at the heart of what Americans think about how the world should be. And we think about how people should it's raising the question about how we respect the land, how we manage our own country. So I think, solar is probably the way to go. Obviously, there are other components like wind power. You know, there are other different elements of it that are more controversial than others. I mean, I generally at Third Act we're not generally fans of nuclear. I know some folks in the environmental movement are a little bit more nuclear friendly. I always ask people, would you live next to a nuclear power plant? And they just don't usually have a good answer to that. And I think that says a lot. But
I'll mention we had Bill McKibben, um, one of the founders of Third Act in town in Albany last week, actually in Troy. And he has a new book out, Here Comes the Sun. And one of the things he pointed out was in Pakistan, which is pretty much a developing third world country, in a period of about 4 or 5 years, I think almost half of their energy now is coming from solar. And partly it's because they boarded China. And it wasn't because of the government. It was just that the grid in Pakistan is so unreliable and so expensive. People just went across the border to China, bought cheap solar, and brought it back. And now it's become like the major source of electricity in their country. In addition to wind and to solar, one of the things here in the Capital District in New York we've been pushing is, geothermal energy, air heat pumps. And surprisingly, the state that's done the best job in geothermal is that radical lefty state, Texas, which actually is leading the country not only in geothermal but in solar. And surprisingly, much of the geothermal in Texas is being actually done for electricity, not just for heating and cooling. And one thing I sort of should have mentioned earlier is that, while we have this president who is a climate denier-in-chief, we unfortunately, in the last 2 years or so, really seen the Democrats in full-scale retreat. It's certainly the case here in New York, it's the case in Pennsylvania, case in New Jersey, a bunch of other states. And even the limited progress we have made, they're now saying electric bills are too high. Well, electric bills are too high because of the volatility of natural gas prices. Much of the gas in this country, much electricity comes from natural gas. And certainly with the tremendous increase in price in gas, due to Iran. That's a big problem. So, Jill, I don't know if you have anything you want to add. And also, I've asked Holly Hart to keep track of questions. I know, Holly, are there other questions you'd like to bring to our attention?
Um, I'll just get a couple of them here. I think you've seen them. One, well, there are a couple. I'll just mention a couple of them. You can go back. One, Barbara Laxon asked, "Do we need chemical fertilizers?" No. You can get natural ones, but that was one. Do we need chemical fertilizers? Jared Still had asked what policy of the Green Party sparked interest in him joining and deciding, yes, this is something I can get down with. And then someone, SH says, what is one big issue to rally around? I want a toolkit for getting good people like Jill in office. That's kind of a summary of what has gone up there, if that's.
Those are great. Those are really great questions. And before I dive in on a couple of them, I want to just note that people are saying, for example, some of the comments here are really great. Lois Gagnon saying, stop AI data centers. I mean, these are great issues to be organizing around and great issues to motivate campaigns. You know, speaking to one of the big questions you gathered up, Holly, you know, what's a toolkit for getting people elected? You know, it's all about basically getting active on things that are really threatening your community because, you know, the data centers, the big AI centers, you know, they gobble up electricity, they drive the costs up, they exhaust your water supplies, and they pollute. And people across the political spectrum, it's a very unifying issue. It's a great issue to be active on. Let's see. Oh, and I wanted to mention that Don Bryant put up a link for participating in the gas boycott. You know, one of the big issues there is like, what do you offer people, you know, in exchange if they're not going to use their car? There's probably carpooling, I think, you know, and public transit to the extent it's there. But there's definitely some organizing that would go into this. And if there are people who can do that, you know, it's a great time to be doing it because people really don't want to be, you know, using their small discretionary cash, the little bit of profit that they make over the course of the week, where they're living paycheck to start with, and people are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. You know, people don't want to be losing, you know, their little bit of discretionary income at the gas pump. So that is, if you maybe post it again, Don, because people have to scroll up a little bit to find it. So put it up there again if people are interested. And likewise, if you're interested in getting the slides that Michael has used, and I definitely would like your slides, Michael, there's really great stuff in there, or the ones that I've put together, just, you know, say so in the chat and, you know, put your email so we can mail it to you. Let's see. And let's see, of the questions that you just mentioned, Holly, the last of them was the toolkit. Oh, the first one was about fertilizer.
Yeah, it's chemical fertilizers, and go ahead.
Well, the alternative to chemical fertilizers is organic and non-toxic fertilizers, and we all ought to be composting. During the Second World War, there was a severe shortage of fresh fruits and vegetables, and half of that supply then came from victory gardens in people's backyards. There's a lot of local food production that we can do to help take the edge off of the impending food crisis and famine. And the shortage of fertilizer is a big part of that. So if you are learning to compost, and which is really basically very drop dead simple to do, you can be producing your own fertilizer, your own high quality fertilizer, very simply and inexpensively, and saving a lot of money. And there are sustainable systems of farming as well, where that can be done, at scale. Not big corporate farms, but smaller and sustainable organic farms, which are also quite feasible. And in fact, the industrial farming is losing our topsoil as well, and we have something like 40 more cycles to go with our current soil situation. So we have to do this transition anyhow. And now, it's not like it's just the war in Iran. We're living in a very unstable kind of geopolitical environment now. And Iran, is not going to take it anymore. But that's true for a lot of countries out there. They're not going to take it anymore. And there are a lot of resources out there that we've basically been hijacking and stealing. And things are changing, and we need to have more resilient, just, and sustainable systems. And sustainable farming is part of that. There's a lot that we can do ourselves. And when you are producing your own food, even if it's just, a little bit of container gardening here and there, you learn a lot. It's a wonderful way to kind of reconnect with the planet and to begin developing some of those tools and skills that are going to be increasingly important.
Just quickly, and I see Michael has added on in the chat the link to the Mayday Strong main page. EcoAction is a partner in the Mayday Strong effort, and just got an email 5 minutes ago. Hey, come to our bi-weekly meetings type of situation. I also do a daily radio show. So one of my interviews today was I interviewed the Northeast Organic Farm Association of New York, and they actually have joined this lawsuit filed by Earth Justice challenging the EPA's rollback of a lot of climate rules and making the point that farmers are so challenged by climate change, extreme weather, more pests, droughts, and stuff of that nature. And they just said we cannot afford for the EPA and the Trump administration to cut back protections. And for most of my career, actually, I ran a statewide anti-hunger group in New York. And about 10, 15 years ago, one of the things we used to talk a lot about was that when when Russia had its problems and stopped shipping oil to Cuba, they were forced very quickly to move to a much more organic food system. And at that point, they allowed people to do basically community gardens in Havana and stuff like that. And very rapidly, that became like one of the largest sources of food in Havana. Of course, now Cuba has been decimated because of decades of economic boycott, which has intensified in the last few years, and the cutoff of oil from Venezuela. But they made a rapid transition to organic agriculture because of the loss of fossil fuels. That's the base of the fertilizer. But Michael, did you have anything you wanted to add in?
I just sent a question.
Yeah, that question from Jared about how to take advantage. Local, I mean, that's how I got involved with the Green Party when I moved to Madison. The Green Party in Madison, Wisconsin was partnered with another organization in Madison, independent political organization called Mayday. So that's how I met Ben Mansky, and I met Marsha Rummel, and one of my proteges, Leland Pan, got elected to the county board, who's also a local Green. The Greens were just where it was at in Madison. They were doing good local issues around affordable housing, affordable wages. They, opposing giving tax breaks to hotels because that's what the Democratic mayor wanted to do and things like that. So that's just where the good work. And of course, obviously, the Greens opposed the war in Iraq when the Democrats were still for the war in Iraq, and the Greens were opposed to ICE back then. I mean, I was a college student organizing opposition to ICE and partnering with the Democratic sheriff of Dane County. So, we're ahead of the curve in a lot of ways, especially ahead of the curve, as the saying goes, of the arc of justice. Now, of course, if you're a college Democrat, you wouldn't even think twice about opposing ICE. But when I was calling them to ask to volunteer, like, oh, well, the sheriff's a Democrat, we can't be involved with that. I was like, well, he's doing bad stuff. So that's what brought me into the Green Party, and so the Green Party movement was just where good work was. That's where the just work was happening, not just say good work, but just and moral work was taking place in the Green Party. So
there was also a question posed as to where does the Green Party stand on nuclear power? We're opposed. We remain opposed. And, that was the real focus of the German Greens, West German Greens, when they first began to organize, I guess in the 1980s, was opposed to nuclear power. Nuclear power is not carbon free when you look at the life cycle of the construction, and particularly the mining operations and the exploitation of indigenous lands. It's also incredibly expensive. People probably know that the public utility commissioners in the state of Georgia went from Democrat to Republican, especially on the massive cost increases. Georgia's the only place that's built new nuclear power plants in the last couple of decades. They take way too long to build to have any impact upon climate change and incredibly expensive. And unfortunately, both parties are heavily promoting nuclear power. New York's Governor Hochul is trying to line up us as the, leader in nuclear power. She's committed to New York Power Authority to build one new nuclear power plant, and she wants 4 other nuclear power plants to be built. She's
Governor of New,
extended.
the governor of New Jersey just ended the moratorium on nuclear power after 40 years, I think today.
So we will try to send out the slides that are provided to us. We did know sometimes the slides are too long too big for the emails. We may ask, I think David Dunan's on, who's the Green Party webmaster. So we may ask him if he can hide them someplace on the web so we can link to that for people to do that. Gloria Matara from New York, chair of our media committee, but I also know she used to be besides chair of the Green Party in New York State, was also the chair of the Labor Committee in New York City for a while. And so he's one of them. We can talk any more about how are trade unions engaged around May 1st at this point. Is there any other coalition or organization independently organizing around the strike? I know Socialist Alternative is one that's been doing that, but I don't know if, Michael, you know anything else about what the unions may be doing.
I think they are. I know at least at the No Kings kind of post event, the president of the AFL-CIO was on the call and calling for folks to be involved. I think at the local level with central labor councils and things like that, it's a little bit easier. I think as is with the labor movement in a lot of ways, there's a measured approach depending on the type of, public sector unions are more engaged. I think some of the trade unions, it really depends on what region or the type of relationship. I always if when you're trying to do organizing locally, find the people who have the good connections, people who are in the movement, or people who have friends in the movement who can really speak to it in those spaces. I think, DSA was kind of one of the first groups that really signed on to Mayday Strong. So I imagine they're doing some independent kind of coalition building in tandem with the Mayday Strong's kind of broader coalition. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of different union locals at the kind of regional and municipal level and state level as well. I think the national AFL-CIO is kind of gently pushed against folks into it, some more fast than others. So
yeah, I'll just mention at the No Kings rally at the New York State Capitol in Albany, probably the strongest speaker was from the Capital District Area Labor Federation, very anti-war. They represent the 7 county central labor councils in the Capital District, so their official body, the AFL-CIO. And they mentioned that both the UAW, which have been pushing this for a while, but they also mentioned that the Air Traffic Controllers Union seem to be mobilizing on it. And it just so happened that in Albany on May 1st, the Teachers Union, New York State United Teachers, is holding their annual regional assembly, and so they're all going to come down and join the labor protest. So I would, if you want to find out what's going on, talk to the UAW, talk to the Air Traffic Controllers Union, and talk to your general labor activist solidarity person.
and teachers, I think the NEA and AFT are also big partners in Mayday as well.
And can you clarify, Michael or Mark, what you know about sort of a common set of demands for these various, labor endorsements, the different coalitions for strikes. You know, it's a Mayday strike, and is it generally agreed across the board that this is about no war and no ICE? I mean, is it sort of those two pillars predominantly to shut down ICE, which I hope means to defund it, not just rein it in, which is what the Democrats are talking about, which will not work. They are a lawless organization. The rules are already there and they don't obey them, and have absolutely no intention of doing that, and are extremely dangerous, not only in our streets, but surrounding our polls, which is what they've been basically tasked with doing if they're allowed to get away with it. You know, we need to defund ICE, and we need to stop the war in Iran. We need to stop the war on Palestine. We need to stop the war on Lebanon. You know, I'm really interested in sort of what are the demands at this point? How unified are people? And it's not as though that's a deal breaker. You know, I think we have to start with this idea, and then we really got to push it. We have a lot of educating to do, and if people just agree about Iran, that's a good beginning. But we've got more to do as well. I'm
So
curious.
I just pulled up the Mayday pledge from the Mayday Strong. So 3 key demands: tax the rich so our families, not their fortunes, come first. No ICE, no war, no private army serving authoritarian power, and then expand democracy, hands off our vote. And certainly make reference to going after the oligarchs and supporting Minnesota's resistance to the occupation. And they're calling for a day of no school, no work, no shopping, to disrupt the violent billionaire takeover of our country and to put working families first. So, I mean, they don't say Iran, but they say no war.
Yeah, it's a good start
Right.
for sure. Yeah.
Holly, any other questions you've noticed?
Someone had just risen, or Jan Boudart wrote, raise your hand, and I asked if she would put her question in the chat. There was one that now that I'm looking for, but you may have already covered it.
I'll just mention someone is requesting that a link to the recording also be sent out so that people can, share it and listen to it again.
Yes, that will be sent out. I will notice that people try to organize a screening of Abby Martin's film Earth's Greatest Enemy in your area. Actually, in my area, in the Capital District, we have 3 showings in the next week. Basically, Earth's greatest enemy is the military and its impact upon the environment. I actually tried to get Ralph Nader to interview Abby for his radio hour type of thing. I did interview Abby for my radio show. So when I sent out a notice of, we're going to post this on our YouTube YouTube Green Party page. We will send an email to the 1,200 people who are part of our listserv, and we'll include links to the slides that are provided, and I'll include a link to the interview with Abby's Earth's Greatest Enemy.
I do have a couple things. I think this is what Jan Boudart wanted to let people to know in the North Illinois. Earth's Greatest Enemy is showing at Rogers Park, Chicago Library this Saturday, April 18th, 1:45. The Green Party in Chicago is sponsoring this. And I do recall, it was Lois Gagnon asking about public transit. Wouldn't public transit be an improvement over?
Yeah, I mean, that's only one of the big climate fights is we don't want to, yes, electric vehicles are better than, fossil fuel cars. Mass transit is better than electric vehicles. Obviously, we'll see want your mass transit to be electric and stuff like that. But trying to fight so that we don't keep on investing money in the automobile industry, but instead promote, mass transit, as Mandami's trying to do in New York City, make the buses free. As a former New York City resident, I know that more low-income people ride the buses than ride the subway. Both should be free. And a number of communities around the country have made their mass transit free is a great climate strategy, and it's a
Mhm.
good way for income redistribution.
And I'll mention also that in many of the countries in Southeast Asia, Japan, Indonesia, the Philippines, they get their fossil fuels, their oil and LNG predominantly comes through the Strait of Hormuz, and they are absolutely in a panic right now. And this is true for India as well. And they are imposing some really draconian policies like that you can't drive cars or that you have to work from home. I mean, they're doing really some very uh, transformative policies to meet the emergency. And to the extent that we can harness this, this moment of like conservation or die, to like make some changes to make that possible, like public transit in particular. It's a huge opportunity right now to seize that moment. I'm looking at a comment in the chat about the GPUS platform stating, nowhere does it state an intent to abolish ICE. I don't know if that may be the case, and part of the problem is that the platform doesn't get updated, continuously. So there may be some delay on that, but I would point out that if you look at the platform of both our flagship campaigns, our presidential races, our congressional and senatorial races, uniformly, I haven't seen anybody at this point who is not advocating, anything but abolishing ICE and saying why that is. So just wanted to
I mean, the National Party has frequently put out media calling for the abolition of ICE.
do. Yeah, it's in many of their press releases.
That platform's a slow process of amending.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're sort of running out of time at this point, so I'm going to give each of our speakers an opportunity for, I don't know, 3-4 minutes of closing statement.
Sure.
Let Michael go first since he went
Yeah,
last.
no problem. Again, thanks for having me. If you have any emails, then I'll make sure that Mark gets all the slides and the links. You can email me at mike@thirdact.org. Like I said, and I dropped the link in the chat. We are Third Act and Public Citizen and Food and Water Watch are having a Zoom call next week about how to organize against data centers and stop them and call for a data center moratorium. So that'll be a great event for folks to take a look at if they're interested in some of the work we're doing around data centers at Third Act. So
Exciting. Terrific. Okay, and I'll just give a big thank you. It was great to hear you, Michael, and see you again after all these years. Um, I'm not sure if our paths crossed directly. I certainly knew your name from the 2016 campaign, or it might have been the 2012. Yeah, it was probably 2012 because that's when Mansky was involved. I sure knew your name, but I don't recall if we actually met, but it's great to see you in action now. And Mark, thank you so much for all the work that you do with EcoAction. Thank you, Holly, for your support through EcoAction. And thanks to everybody out there for doing what you're doing and being on this call tonight. I think as Greens, we have been, kind of, we're not surprised by what's happening. I mean, this is kind of what our long-term visioning and policy making has been about. And it's a really important time for us to step up and to turn this disaster, this multi-system disaster we're facing right now, war, the economy, jobs, the upcoming depression, the crisis of water and climate and all that. It's really important for us to step up in this emergency and to push for positive and lasting change that enables us to survive and even thrive in a sustainable and just way. It's really important, the last webinar that the EcoAction Committee did, which was about the Green New Deal, is fabulous. And Mark, I hope you'll include that as a resource in the follow-up to this. It's fantastic. And what this committee is doing has been really important. Likewise, our Peace Action Committee has been also doing really wonderful work. One thing we don't have in the Green Party is a Labor Action Committee, and we badly need that. And I really want to encourage people to think about stepping up to help make that committee happen. Um, we've done a lot of work, and that work kind of needs to be put into action like right about now, while there's still time. And I take great encouragement and pride in what the Green Party has done and in our work. And it's really important now for us to close the loop and to help get that work actually implemented. And also, along those same lines, a big shout out to our campaigns. We have a number of really amazing candidates running right now, including Butch Ware running for governor of California, who they just threw off the ballot for completely concocted and outrageous reasons. I love how the Democrats, are quick to challenge the Republicans for manipulating elections, but then they do the same thing, as in the 2024 presidential race, where they had an army of lawyers to come up with trivial reasons to get us thrown off the ballot, and use our resources and time to just struggle for our democratic right to challenge, a system of endless war and genocide and worker exploitation and climate disaster. It's really important time for us to challenge. Bush is doing that right now. We have great candidates who are running for Congress as well, and others who are running locally in addition, who are fabulous. So I really want to encourage people to please, support your local candidates, support the candidates nationally. You can help them by phone banking, through social media, fundraising, contributing, and so on. People are really hungry now for big change and for alternatives, and part of that is political change. So there's a political vacuum of integrity to be filled right now. The Republicans are crashing and burning, and so are the Democrats. So they're really doing they're going to the mat right now to silence Greens and to deny the public a choice that would actually provide the solutions that we are dying for lack of. So thank you to everybody who's a part of this, and keep it up. We're kind of at the breaking point, and it's our job to turn that breaking point into a tipping point. We've got the makings of that right here at hand. So thank you all so very much.
So we hope everybody goes back and look for ways in your community to make Earth Day to Mayday a reality. Join the Mayday strong efforts. Look for, climate actions, other actions around Earth Day. Promote solar, promote wind, promote geothermal. EcoAction meets the second Monday of each month. 3 representatives from each state. So contact your state if you'd like to be a representative, and we will follow up with information. And thank you to our 2 panelists for joining us here today.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Peace out.